Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of PEM Rules, the Pediatric Emergency Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Yaron Ivan, as usual. And today, I'd like to discuss the topic that many of us pediatric emergency medicine clinicians and other clinicians shy from: conducting research. I couldn't think of a better person to discuss this topic than my own attending from fellowship, Dr. Bob Hickey, who has conducted a lot of research studies in the lab and outside of it. I contacted Bob several months ago, and he was more than happy to talk about his favorite thing in the world: research. So, welcome, Bob. Thank you very, very much for coming on the show. I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate it. Let me just introduce you to the listeners. Bob Hickey was my attending when I was a fellow at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. He completed medical school at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, then continued to do his general pediatric residency at Sinai Hospital in Baltimore, followed by pediatric emergency medicine fellowship at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, where I trained. He has been an attending physician at CHP for 27 years and currently serves as the director of research at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh for pediatric emergency medicine. Bob has published over 125 papers in the field of pediatric emergency medicine. I will tell you on a personal level that Bob was one of my favorite attendings to work with in the pediatric emergency department, although at times he was very harsh with the fellows. So one of my biggest memories is working hard, many hours on my fellowship project, which Bob literally said it was a cheap shot. But I got over it. Anyways, Bob, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great here.
Thank you again.
Say that for me again. What did you say it was?
Cheap shot. You called my fellowship project cheap shot.
Chip. CHIP.
Whatever.
No, it's not cheap. It's chip.
Whatever. I got over it, Bob. I'm doing okay.
Oh, thank God.
But really, Bob, I know how busy you are, and I'm glad it worked out. I wanted to get you on the show for a very long time. And the things I wanted to discuss with you, Bob, as a PEM fellow and pediatric resident who did some research, certainly focused on my clinical work and teaching, like many others, I must say I find the area of research quite intimidating. I don't think I'm alone. I think a lot of us who work clinically or even go into medicine find research very intimidating. Why do you think so many of us clinicians shy from doing research? And what advice would you give those people like me?
So, I think the biggest hurdle is just starting it is hard. It's kind of like, I don't know, exercise. You know, if you're exercising every day, you don't want to stop, right? You sort of get in that. If you're running every day, you're not going to stop running. But then when you stop running, you don't want to start. It's just one of those things you have to start. And once you get hooked, you're not going to stop. But it's intimidating. It seems like a very sort of large area of inquiry. People, I think, just don't know where to start. And I think they spend a lot of time thinking about like the big question or what's their niche going to be. And I don't think that's really should be the focus for people starting in research. I think this gets back to that chip shot. I always like a chip shot. Chip shot, by the way, is in golf a little easy shot is what it was. So that's when I referred to your study as a chip shot, it was an easy study. It's a perfect kind of study. Years later, he told me he was pissed off it was cheap shot, which I thought was funny. So a chip shot is something that's defined. It's a simple question. You're going to answer it. And you don't want to like get the big question in your life, your first research project, because you're going to screw it up. Truthful. You're going to get much better as time goes on in every aspect of research. So you really want to start simple. And the goal is to learn something new. And there's a lot to learn into a first project. First, you got to do a lit review, see if it's already been done. Then you got to first got to find a question, then a lit review, then decide on like, what's the study design? Is this going to be a chart review? Is it going to be case control, cohort study, randomized study? Or are you going to go to the science lab? And after that, then there's the IRB submission. Then you're either getting the records, making case report forms, getting the data, or enrolling families, getting data. Then once you get the data, you got to figure out how to analyze it with stats. Then you have to figure out what it means, how to present it. Is it going to be figures, charts, tables, whatever the most effective mechanism is? Then you've got to present it somewhere, and then you've got to write the paper, and it's going to get rejected, and then you got to resubmit it, and then it's accepted with revisions, and then you got to write the revisions. So it's a lot. At the end, it is really oddly rewarding and satisfying, right? I mean, weren't you really happy when you got it published?
I was super excited when it got published.
So-
I felt like I made a contribution to the field of pediatric emergency medicine. It's a very
Yeah.
small one, but
Yeah, it was a chip shot. It was perfect. So it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so the goal is just to get that experience and learn all of those things. It's not about the question. And I think people sort of get stuck on the question. Fellows get a pass from me on the so what question, like why, so what? When you look at the paper, are you going to read this paper? The so what question, really comes later on in your career when you're starting to develop more of a niche and think about more serious contributions. And a lot of chip shots are just like, one simple question, like your question for the RET scam. You're not going to become the PDM retinal expert, right? There's no career path there. But you had a simple question and you were able to answer it. And all that other stuff is the more important stuff to me, more so than the answer to the question you were asking. So,
yeah. No, I think those are, again, those are very good points and something that I certainly want our audience to hear. I always tell my residents and my medical students, we as clinicians will probably take care of hundreds, maybe thousands of patients in our career. We'll have some impact, but it's really the people who do research and publish and make conclusions that have a long lasting, maybe even never ending impact on medicine. Because, if you find some treatment, some test, or even just answer a clinical question, you can reach out and help so many people. So I think it's really great that we have people like you, and I appreciate those comments. My next question to you, and it's kind of related to the first question, and again, it's for residents, it's for fellows, as you probably know, Bob. The ACGME requirements around residencies and fellowships have gotten, I don't want to say tighter, but a little bit more demanding in recent years. So now when you're a resident, when I was a resident even, in general pediatrics, you have to do a QI, you have to do a scholarly activity, and oftentimes your director will encourage you to make it a research project. And you've done all of that. And I wanted to know from you, Bob, what is your advice for people like me or medical students about to go to residency? Where should they start with their research career?
So I think that, just sort of developing that normal, natural state of inquiry is really important, and identifying people who can sort of shepherd you through that. So if you have somebody who's really, really doing some strong research, tag along because they probably have a couple small projects for you. So I think, get a mentor, get someone you can do, can help you along. Make sure that whatever you're doing something new. So if you've already done chart reviews and some point in your career and already know how to do it, don't do that. Try something else.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it simple would be my advice.
No, so I think those are great advice. And so what I'm hearing you saying basically, Bob, is number one, get a good mentor and do something different every time. Is that kind of a good summary?
Yeah, the other thing I would add is the two stumbling blocks for a lot of people is one is statistics. There's just like this fear of statistics.
Yeah.
And I could tell because in journal club, every journal club, they want to talk about the statistics in a paper. I am never interested in the statistics in journal club. Right? I mean, you should know statistics, but you're going to learn how to do them when you do your own research. What I would prefer people to think about is concentrate more on the methods and, like the question that was asked, how they asked the question, did they ask the right question? Does the data really show what it's supposed to show? What are the biases? In other words, the same way as I would review a paper that was submitted to some journal and ask me to review it. I'm not going to go in there and say, I'm not going to recalculate someone's positive predictive value. Okay. It's not a good use of my time. I trust they did it right. There's stats reviewers to do that. So I think don't be afraid of the stats. Focus really on the methods. And then the whole aspect of the writing thing that also gets people hung up. It's hard to write. There's the old saying, I hate writing, but I love having written.
Yeah, so those are excellent points, Bob. Thank you very much. The final question, Bob, I wanted to ask you, and again, thank you for all your words of wisdom, is, I trained in the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, just like you, and you have a colleague that I interviewed somewhere in January, my great mentor and your colleague and friend, Rick Saladino, who has a lot of rules, and he was the inspiration behind my podcast. I wanted to ask you, Bob, what is your favorite pediatric emergency medicine rule, and what does it mean for you?
My favorite rule is don't just do something, stand there. So I think clinically we tend to sort of intervene too much, get too many tests, give too many unnecessary treatments. So that's my favorite rule. Don't just do something, stand there. As an example, there's a seizing patient, right? So what does everybody do at the very beginning? Even if the SATs are 100%, they put oxygen on, right? Do all this sort of stuff. Give them some medicines, and someone says, "Oh, they don't have a gag." I don't have a gag, or you're postictal, you're seizing, and then after they stop seizing, they get some upper airway obstruction, and instead of doing upper airway maneuvers, they're just sort of oftentimes rushed to intubation. So much of that could be avoided. I'm not saying you shouldn't give people oxygen, but you should think about everything we do. I mean, because look at the message you're giving to the parents, right? Because now they're thinking, oh my God, suppose this happened in his sleep when I wasn't there. I don't have oxygen at home. So again, if the SATs are low, you should do it. But if not, you should think about it, or at least think about what we're doing. There's clinical questions everywhere. Every single time somebody in the ED asks you a question, and if you don't know the answer to it, well, that's a research question right there. Not all of them are answerable, but it's a research question. So I just, don't just do something, stand there, relax, take your own pulse. And I think it's patients will be better off.
All right. So again, great advice for the listeners. And again, thank you, Bob, very, very much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. Great having you. And again, great to hear your words of wisdom. And as usual, Bob, I like to dedicate an outro to my guests. And obviously, people already realize we spoke in advance, and you like Van Morrison, I guess, right?
Yep.
So that's easy. But you also indicated that you would want to hear me do Boom Boom by John Lee Hooker. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. So tell me a little bit about that guy, because I got to say, what is that?
He's just one of those old blues guys, been around forever. And, he was emulated by, the Stones and Van Morrison, who, all those people emulated John Lee Hooker and actually his people even before him, way before him. But he's just sort of along that line of, guitar pickers.
All right. So I guess I'm going to have to learn some blues by John Lee Hooker in your honor. All right. Thank you, Bob. Thank you again for coming on the show. Great seeing you.
Yep.
And that is it for today, guys. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. I hope you check out PEM Rules, subscribe to my newsletter, and see how you can contribute to my educational project on the home website. And here is my attempt to play Boom Boom by John Lee Hooker. Bob, I hope I didn't disappoint. Never played blues before. That's the best I can do. Hope you like it.